In the wealthy suburbs of Fairfield, Thomas and Olivia Lancaster lived a life of privilege. Their sprawling estate boasted a stately Georgian mansion, luxury vehicles, and exclusive memberships to Fairfield Country Club. Their lives revolved around grand charity balls, art auctions, and maintaining their standing among Connecticut's upper crust. When Olivia discovered she was expecting at 41, it seemed like the final perfect touch to their meticulously crafted lives. They transformed the guest suite into a lavish nursery, enlisting one of New York's top designers to oversee every detail. Thomas even commissioned a renowned portrait artist to decorate the walls with whimsical murals for their unborn child. "She'll be flawless," Olivia would often say over brunch with friends at the club. "With Thomas's strong jawline and my eyes, how could she not be?" The baby shower, a feature in Connecticut Society Weekly, saw gifts from Cartier and Dior piling high in the Lancaster foyer. Everything was picture perfect. But life had other plans. On a chilly October morning in 1987, Olivia gave birth to their daughter, whom they named Emily. The delivery room, normally filled with joyful chatter, fell silent. Baby Emily was born with severe craniofacial differences. Her face was asymmetrical, her nose flat on one side, and her upper lip divided by a bilateral cleft. Olivia refused to hold her. She turned her head away when the nurse gently tried to place the newborn in her arms. Thomas paced the corridor, making frantic calls to specialists across the country, his polished shoes tapping nervously against the tiled floor. 3 days later, Sister Agnes Marie of St. Helena's Home for Children found a basket at the orphanage's doorstep. Inside, wrapped in a delicate monogrammed cashmere blanket, was baby Emily. A note tucked beneath her tiny hands read, "We cannot give her the life she deserves. Please find her a better home." Sister Agnes cradled the infant, noticing how Emily's eyes, despite her physical differences, sparkled with intelligence and quiet strength. "Well now, little one," the nun whispered softly. "God doesn't make mistakes. Let's find out the special plan He has for you." That morning marked the beginning of Emily's remarkable journey, one that would challenge the world's narrow views of beauty and reveal the profound value of a heart untouched by judgment. What Thomas and Olivia Lancaster couldn't see beyond Emily's face would ultimately inspire thousands and reshape countless hearts. Sister Agnes had no way of knowing that the fragile infant she held would one day become extraordinary, a young woman who would teach the world that true beauty lies far beneath the skin. Despite Sister Agnes's efforts to find Emily a family, the years passed with no permanent home in sight. Time and again, potential adoptive parents politely declined after the first meeting. Yet, Emily flourished at St. Helena's. By the age of 4, she showed a remarkable gift for music. Sister Agnes first noticed Emily's talent during morning mass. While the other children squirmed restlessly in their pews, little Emily sat completely still, captivated by the choir. Her small body swayed gently in time with the hymns. Later that afternoon, Sister Agnes found her at the old piano in the orphanage's hall, perfectly recreating the melodies she had heard that morning. "Child, who taught you to play?" Sister Agnes asked, astonished. "The angels did," Emily answered simply, her uneven lips curving into a soft smile. By the time Emily was 12, she had become the orphanage's unofficial music teacher. She instructed younger children and led the choir with a natural confidence that defied her age. Her talent was undeniable. Yet performing publicly posed difficulties. Some parents would guide their children away at the sight of her, while others whispered quietly in the corners of the room. Everything changed the day Miss Catherine Hale walked through the doors of St. Helena's. A celebrated vocal instructor at the New England Conservatory, Catherine had stopped by to donate music books. As she placed the books on a table, a familiar sound drifted through the air. The delicate notes of Bach's Prelude in C major. Catherine froze. "That can't be right," she murmured, following the music toward the main hall. "That arrangement is far too advanced." She found Emily alone, her fingers gliding effortlessly over the piano keys. The music enveloped the room, Emily entirely lost in its rhythm and flow. When she finished, Catherine stepped forward, startling Emily. The girl immediately lowered her head, allowing long, dark strands of hair to fall over her face, a practiced habit born from years of unwanted stares. "Look at me, dear," Catherine said softly. Catherine Hale spoke softly. Emily slowly lifted her head, revealing the unique features that had shaped so much of her life. Catherine's gaze didn't falter. She wasn't focused on Emily's face, her eyes were fixed on Emily's hands. "Those are pianist's hands," Catherine declared. "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 4, ma'am," Emily whispered. "And who taught you?" "No one. I just hear it in my head." Catherine eased down beside Emily on the worn piano bench, her crisp, tailored suit a stark contrast to Emily's faded orphanage uniform. "Play something else for me," Catherine encouraged. "Anything you like." Emily hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys before softly beginning Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The music swirled through the room, rich with the kind of longing only a child who had known both abandonment and unconditional love could summon. When the final note faded, Catherine's eyes shimmered. "I've taught at the conservatory for 30 years, she said, voice thick with emotion. "I've never heard anyone your age play with such soul." From the doorway, Sister Agnes Marie had been silently watching. Catherine turned to her. "This child is a prodigy. She needs proper training." "We don't have the resources," Sister Agnes began apologetically, but Catherine held up a hand. "I'm not asking for money. I'm offering to teach her myself, free of charge." Emily's heart pounded. "But my face." Catherine took Emily's hands gently in her own. "My dear," she said with a smile, "when you play, no one will be looking at your face. They'll be too busy watching your hands create magic." That evening, Sister Agnes found Emily sitting in the chapel, candles flickering softly around her. "Are you afraid?" the nun asked, settling beside her. Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. "What if I go out there and they're cruel? What if they only see—" Emily gestured to her face, unable to finish the sentence. Sister Agnes pulled a small mirror from her pocket. "Look closely," she instructed. Reluctantly, Emily took the mirror, scanning her reflection with a critical eye. "I see my nose, my lip, everything that's wrong." "No," Sister Agnes said firmly. "Look at your eyes. Do you see that light? That's your gift shining through. That's God's purpose for you. Maybe you were given this face so that you could teach the world to look deeper, to listen harder, and to find beauty in places they'd never expect." Emily touched the glass lightly. "Do you think my real parents ever think about me?" Sister Agnes smiled sadly. "I think they lost the privilege of being your real parents the day they left you here. But someday, they'll know what they gave up. And that day, my dear, will be something to witness." Months later, Emily's first public recital at the Hartford Conservatory Junior Showcase was approaching. Catherine had dedicated endless hours to preparing her, not just musically, but emotionally. The showcase would bring together young talents from across New England, and the audience would include influential figures in the region's arts community. 2 weeks before the event, Emily was practicing alone when she overheard voices in the hall. "Did you hear? Olivia Lancaster is chairing the showcase committee this year. The real estate mogul's wife. Quite a catch for the conservatory." Emily's fingers froze mid-piece. That name? It had been on her original birth certificate, the one Sister Agnes had shown her when she turned 12. Her birth mother. The next day during her lesson, Emily's hands trembled so much that she could barely press the keys. "What's wrong, dear?" Catherine asked, watching her student's unusual distraction. My birth mother will be at the showcase," Emily murmured. "She's the committee chair." Catherine's expression softened. She had known Emily's story. Sister Agnes had shared it when they began lessons, but she had never anticipated this coincidence. "Do you want to withdraw?" Catherine asked gently. Emily rose, walking to the window. She watched the other students cross the conservatory courtyard below. For years, she had imagined what she might say if she ever met her parents. Now that the moment felt possible, a storm of emotions brewed. Anger, fear, but also a quiet desire to show them who she had become. "No," she said finally. "I want to play." The day of the showcase arrived, sunlight spilling through the conservatory's tall stained glass windows. Backstage, Emily peeked through the curtains. Her eyes found Olivia Lancaster immediately. Graceful in Chanel, her hair expertly styled, effortlessly coordinating the event with practiced efficiency. "She has no idea who I am," Emily whispered. "She will," Catherine replied, carefully adjusting Emily's dress. "But remember, today isn't about her. It's about your gift." Emily took a deep breath and smoothed the fabric of her dress. As Emily waited for her turn backstage, she heard the whispers from other performers and their parents. Despite her growing reputation at the conservatory, her appearance still drew curious stares and hushed conversations. But today, something felt different. The music humming in her mind drowned out the murmurs. Finally, the announcer called her name. Emily Lancaster, performing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Emily stepped onto the stage, head held high, just as Catherine had taught her. A ripple of gasps ran through the audience. In the third row, Olivia Lancaster's hand shot to her throat, her program slipping from her grasp. Emily eased onto the piano bench, inhaled deeply, and let her fingers rest on the keys. The first notes floated softly through the hall, delicate as moonlight. She played with everything inside her: loneliness, perseverance, gratitude for Sister Agnes and Catherine, and yes, even the lingering ache of abandonment. The audience sat transfixed. In the third row, Olivia's face had gone pale. Her hands clung to the armrests of her chair. Whether it was Emily's remarkable performance or some deeper maternal instinct, tears streamed down Olivia's face. As the final notes faded, the hall held its breath in silence. Then, thunderous applause erupted. Emily stood, bowed gracefully, and allowed her gaze to find Olivia's. For the first time, their eyes met, not as strangers, but as mother and daughter. In that instant, Emily understood something profound. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need their love. She had found something far greater: her purpose. The following morning, headlines in the Hartford Arts Review declared, "Young pianist's stunning debut moves audience to tears." The performance had sparked more than applause. It ignited conversations about talent, beauty, and prejudice in classical music. But the most unexpected reaction came from Olivia Lancaster herself. Following the recital, she had suffered a very public emotional breakdown, requiring medical attention. The gossip columns buzzed with speculation about her tearful reaction to the mysterious young pianist. Catherine found Emily at the piano early the next day, her fingers drifting over a melancholy Chopin nocturne. "There's something we need to discuss," Catherine said softly, placing a thick envelope on the piano's edge. Emily's hands stilled over the keys. "Olivia Lancaster's lawyer delivered this to the conservatory this morning," Catherine explained. "She wants to meet with you." Emily's heart raced. "Why?" Catherine's eyes softened. "She knows who you are. She recognized your birth date in the program. And your eyes. They're identical to her mother's." With trembling hands, Emily opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter on elegant stationery and several yellowed newspaper clippings. The articles, dated 13 years earlier, celebrated Olivia's pregnancy, the nursery's design, and the extravagant baby shower. A life that had been meticulously planned for her, before they saw her face. "I don't want their money," Emily said firmly, closing the envelope. "That's not what they're offering," Catherine replied gently. "They want to apologize, to explain." Emily stood abruptly, her voice tight with emotion. "Explain?" she snapped. "Explain why they left me because I didn't fit into their perfect little life." From the doorway, Sister Agnes stepped into the room. "Perhaps," the nun said softly, "this is God's way of giving you a chance to heal old wounds, both theirs and yours." For the next week, Emily wrestled with her emotions. Her music darkened, filled with conflict and unanswered questions. By day, she poured herself into preparing for an upcoming competition. By night, she retreated to the quiet chapel at St. Helena's, seeking clarity in the flickering candlelight. Finally, she made a decision. She would meet them. But on her terms. The meeting would take place at St. Helena's, with Sister Agnes and Catherine present. And before she spoke a word to them, she would play. The day of the meeting dawned gray and rainy. Olivia and Thomas Lancaster arrived at St. Helena's in sleek designer coats, looking distinctly out of place among the simple surroundings. Olivia clutched her handbag like a lifeline, while Thomas adjusted his tie nervously. Emily waited in the music room, seated at the very piano where her talent had first emerged. When her parents entered, she didn't greet them. Instead, she let her fingers drift to the keys and began to play. Bach's Prelude in B minor filled the space, a piece woven with sorrow and redemption. As the final chord echoed into silence, Emily turned to face them. Tears streamed down Olivia's cheeks. Thomas stood rigid, his face pale. Emily said nothing, allowing the silence to weigh heavily in the room. Thomas Lancaster stood in stunned silence, as if seeing his daughter for the first time in 13 years. "I'm not here for forgiveness," Emily said clearly, her voice steady. "I'm here because I want you to understand something. When you left me, you thought you were consigning me to a life of limitation and shame, but instead, you gave me my greatest gift." She gestured to Sister Agnes Marie and Catherine Hale, who stood quietly beside her. "These women saw past my face to who I really am. They gave me love without conditions, support without judgment, and the chance to find my voice through music." Olivia stepped forward, her composure beginning to crack. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "We were wrong. We were so terribly wrong. We were young and shallow and afraid." Emily nodded, finishing the thought for her. "I know. I've been afraid too. Afraid every time someone new sees me. Afraid before every performance. But I've learned that fear doesn't have to win." Thomas spoke for the first time, his voice hoarse. "We'd like to be part of your life now, if you'll let us. We can pay for surgeries, specialists." "No." Emily's interruption was firm. "I don't need to be fixed. This face taught me that beauty comes in many forms. My music reaches people because I know what it feels like to be judged, to be different. I wouldn't change that now." While the meeting with her birth parents sent ripples through Emily's personal life, another story was unfolding at the conservatory. Catherine had entered Emily into the prestigious Young Artists International competition, where 12 pianists under 18 would compete for the opportunity to perform with the New England Symphony Orchestra. The moment her name appeared on the list of competitors, controversy erupted. At a heated board meeting, several members voiced their concerns. "This competition is televised," one board member argued. "There will be press coverage, interviews, photos. We need to consider the competition's image." Catherine's voice cut through the room, sharp and unwavering. "What better image," she countered, "than showing the world that true artistry transcends physical appearance?" An unexpected ally emerged that same week. Dr. Lillian Choi, a renowned plastic surgeon, had been in the audience during Emily's showcase performance. Moved by what she witnessed, Dr. Choi approached Sister Agnes with an offer. "I've never heard such raw talent, Dr. Stray," Choi explained, "but I've also never seen such strength in someone facing such challenges. I want to offer corrective surgeries pro bono, but only if she wants them." Later that evening, Sister Agnes gently brought up the offer while Emily practiced. "The surgery could make your life easier," Sister Agnes said softly. "Dr. Choi is the best in her field." Emily's fingers hovered over the keys. "Would it make me play better?" she asked without looking up. "No, dear." "Would it make me more worthy of love?" "Of course not." "Then I don't need it," Emily replied, resuming her practice. "My face has taught me who really sees me and who doesn't. I'm not ready to give up that clarity." The decision seemed to energize Emily. Her practice sessions grew longer, her interpretations deeper. Catherine noticed Emily gravitating toward more complex and emotionally demanding pieces, pushing herself further than anyone expected. One evening, Catherine found Emily gazing into the polished surface of the piano after a particularly grueling practice. "Having second thoughts about Dr. Choi's offer?" Catherine asked gently. Emily shook her head. "No, I was just thinking about something Sister Agnes told me years ago. She said maybe God gave me this face so I could teach the world to look deeper. I didn't understand then, but I do now." She turned to Catherine. "Every time I play, someone comes up to me afterward and shares their own story about feeling different, feeling excluded. They say my music made them feel less alone. If I change my face now, what message would that send?" Catherine smiled, remembering the shy girl she'd first met at St. Helena's. "You've grown wise," Catherine said. "I've grown strong," Emily corrected, "and I'm going to need that strength for the competition." The conversation was interrupted by Sister Agnes arriving with surprising news. "Olivia Lancaster resigned from the conservatory board," Sister Agnes announced. But not before giving a powerful speech about inclusion in the arts. She said she's learned a hard lesson about judging worth by appearance. Emily glanced up, surprised. "She's starting a foundation," Sister Agnes continued, "to support young artists who face physical challenges. It's already attracting attention from donors across the state." Emily quietly processed the news, her fingers drifting across the keys in thought. "She's learning," Catherine said softly. Emily nodded. "So am I." Emily absorbed the news in silence, her fingers absent-mindedly drifting over the keys, weaving a few soft notes from Chopin's Berceuse. "You changed her," Catherine observed, watching Emily closely. "No," Emily replied quietly. "Music changed her. Music changes everyone. That's why I have to win this competition. Not for me, but for every child who's been told they don't belong on stage." As the competition approached, Emily's connection with Catherine deepened. It was no longer just a mentorship, it was something far more profound. Catherine saw that Emily wasn't simply playing the music, she was bearing her soul through every note. One evening, during a quiet practice, Catherine shared something she had never told anyone. "I was once like your mother," Catherine admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. 30 years ago, my sister gave birth to a child with Down syndrome. I encouraged her to give him up for adoption." Emily's fingers froze mid-piece, the lingering notes fading into stillness. Catherine's gaze fell to the floor. "I never saw my nephew again, but watching you, seeing your strength and your gift, has helped me understand what I took from her, and from myself." Emily's voice softened. "What happened to your sister?" "She never forgave me," Catherine said quietly. "She moved to California and started a music program for children with special needs. I send her Christmas cards every year, but she never responds." Emily was quiet for a long moment, then began to play Clair de Lune, letting the tender, lilting notes fill the space between them. When she finished, she turned to Catherine. "Maybe this year," Emily said softly, "you should send her my story instead of a Christmas card." Meanwhile, Olivia Lancaster began attending Emily's practices. She would slip quietly into the back of the hall, never interrupting or speaking to Emily directly. But her presence became constant. One afternoon, Sister Agnes delivered a small package to Emily. "Your mother left this for you," the nun said with a knowing smile. Emily opened the box to find a silver locket. Inside was a photograph of her as a newborn, taken before she had been left at St. Helena's. On the other side was a recent picture of her at the piano, completely immersed in her music. A handwritten note accompanied it. "I carry these two pictures to remind me of my greatest mistake and my greatest lesson. You were beautiful then, and you are beautiful now. I was the one who couldn't see it." From that day forward, Emily wore the locket during her practice sessions. Though she still didn't speak directly to Olivia, she would occasionally hear quiet sobbing from the back of the room after particularly moving passages. Dr. Lillian Choi also became a regular visitor. She never mentioned surgery again. Instead, she approached Sister Agnes with a new idea, launching a music therapy program at her hospital. "Your music gives them hope," Dr. Choi explained to Emily after one session. "When they see you embrace your difference with such grace, it helps them find their own courage." But perhaps the most unexpected shift came from Thomas Lancaster. Unlike Olivia's quiet presence, Thomas approached Emily directly one afternoon, waiting until after her practice to speak. In his hands he held a worn, leather-bound book. "This belonged to my mother," he said, his voice hesitant. "She was a pianist too, though not nearly as talented as you." He held the book out awkwardly. "I thought you might like her sheet music collection." Emily opened the book carefully, revealing pages aged with time. Margins were filled with handwritten notes, scribbled reflections on technique, emotion, and expression. "She would have loved you," Thomas said, his voice catching slightly. "She always said music wasn't about perfection. It was about the heart. I forgot that lesson when I needed it most." As Emily began incorporating the notations into her competition pieces, she felt an unexpected connection with the grandmother she had never known. Someone who, perhaps, would have seen her for who she truly was from the beginning. During breaks, Emily would read the notes aloud to Catherine. "Let the music breathe here. Imagine the sound of rain on roses. Play this like your heart is breaking and healing at once." Sister Agnes observed these new bonds unfolding with quiet satisfaction. One evening, she found Emily alone in the chapel, gently running her fingers over the locket. "Are you ready to forgive them?" Sister Agnes asked, settling beside her. Emily considered the question for a long time. "I'm ready to understand them," she replied at last. "Maybe that's more important than forgiveness right now." The nun smiled knowingly. "Understanding is the beginning of love, dear one, and love is the heart of all great music." That night, Emily added a new piece to her competition program, Fur-Elise. She played it exactly as her grandmother's notes suggested. Play this for someone you are learning to love. The Young Artists International competition arrived on a crisp October morning. Symphony Hall hummed with anticipation as 12 of the most talented young pianists prepared to perform before a panel of world-renowned judges and a sold-out audience. Emily was scheduled to perform last. Backstage, she could hear the polite applause following each competitor's performance. Many had chosen technically dazzling pieces, Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsodies, Rachmaninoff concertos, designed to showcase their virtuosity. Catherine found Emily sitting quietly, her fingers gently tracing the edges of her grandmother's music book. "Are you sure about your program choice?" Catherine asked, her voice soft but cautious. The other teachers had been surprised, even skeptical, when Emily submitted her selections. Some believed her choices weren't competition pieces. "I'm sure," Emily replied without hesitation. "I'm not here to impress them with technique. I'm here to make them feel something." From the stage, she could hear faint whispers from the audience as they read their programs, recognizing her name. The media coverage had been intense in the weeks leading up to the event. Opinions were sharply divided. Some celebrated Emily as an inspiration. Others dismissed her participation as tokenism, a way for the competition to appear inclusive. In the front row, Olivia and Thomas Lancaster sat beside Sister Agnes. Dr. Lillian Choi was there with a group of her young patients. Catherine's sister had even flown in from California after receiving a heartfelt letter from Catherine. The weight of their hopes, expectations, and love seemed to rest on Emily's shoulders. When the stagehand called her name, Emily rose, smoothing her simple concert dress. She touched the silver locket around her neck and walked toward the stage. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as she stepped under the spotlight. But this time, Emily hardly noticed. The music was already alive in her mind, louder than the voices around her. She began with her grandmother's favorite nocturne, carefully following the notations in the margins. "Let your soul speak through your fingers." The piece floated through the hall like a prayer, each note carrying echoes of longing and discovery. Without pausing, Emily transitioned into something new, an original composition she had never shared before. It began softly, like a child's lullaby, delicate and pure. But as it unfolded, the melody grew complex, layered with themes of loss, resilience, and triumph. In the audience, Olivia Lancaster covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She recognized the tune instantly. It was the lullaby she had hummed during her pregnancy. For her final piece, Emily chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the same piece she had played at her first showcase. But this time it felt different. Every note bore the weight of her journey. Every phrase told a story of transformation. As she neared the final movement, thunder rumbled outside. Rain began to patter softly against the towering stained glass windows of Symphony Hall. It was as if nature itself had chosen to accompany her crescendo. When the last note faded, Symphony Hall held its breath in absolute silence. Emily's hands remained on the keys, her head bowed. 1 second passed, 2, 3. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single clap echoed through the silence. Another joined it, and another. Suddenly the entire hall erupted in applause, loud, thunderous, and relentless. People rose to their feet, many with tears streaming down their faces. Strangers embraced. Catherine's sister was sobbing openly, her arms wrapped around Catherine's shoulders. Dr. Choi's patients cheered from their seats. Sister Agnes beamed proudly, her eyes shining with joy. In the front row, Olivia and Thomas clung to one another, their faces transformed by both pride and regret. Even the judges, typically stoic and reserved, were wiping their eyes. Then something unprecedented happened. The head judge, an esteemed conductor known for his stern demeanor, stood. Emily finally looked up. Her face, lit with joy and tears, shone in the glow of the stage lights. In that moment, no one saw her facial differences. They saw the light that radiated from within, the beauty that had been there all along. As the applause continued, rolling through the hall like waves, Emily realized something profound. This wasn't just about winning a competition. She had done something far greater. She had shown the world that true beauty, like true music, comes from the soul. The judges' deliberations stretched longer than usual. The audience remained in their seats, buzzing with excitement and speculation. No one wanted to leave before hearing the results. No one left Symphony Hall. The anticipation was palpable. In the green room, Emily sat quietly, surrounded by the people who had become her family. Sister Agnes sat nearby, quietly moving the beads of her rosary through her fingers. Catherine paced the room, her nerves barely concealed. Olivia and Thomas hovered near the door, unsure of their place, but unwilling to leave. Dr. Lillian Choi sat with her young patients, speaking softly to them about the performance they had just witnessed. "Whatever happens," Catherine said abruptly, halting her pacing, "you've already won something more important than any competition." Before Emily could respond, another competitor approached. Michael Chen, the prodigy who had been favored to win. At 16, Michael had already claimed 3 international titles. "I've been playing piano since I was 3, he said quietly, "but I've never played like that. Never made people feel like that." "How do you do it?" Emily thought for a moment. "I stopped trying to be perfect," she said simply, "and started trying to be true." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I always thought winning meant being better than everyone else. But your music, it wasn't about being better. It was about making everyone better." Before Emily could respond, the competition director entered. "They're ready." As Emily stood, each person in the room reached out, a hand on her shoulder, a squeeze of encouragement. Last was Olivia, who whispered, "Whatever happens, you've already shown me what real beauty is." On stage, all 12 competitors lined up. The head judge, Maestro Giovanni Romano, stepped forward, the hall falling silent in anticipation. But instead of opening the results, he set the envelope aside and addressed the audience. "Before we announce our decision," Romano began, his Italian accent soft but deliberate, "I wish to share something with you." Emily felt Michael's hand slide into hers in quiet solidarity. "When I was appointed head judge," Romano continued, "some expressed concern about including a performer who looks different from what we expect. They feared it might distract from the music." A hush settled over the audience. Emily felt the weight of their attention pressing in. "But today," Romano said, "we witnessed something extraordinary. We saw music transcend the barriers we foolishly place between ourselves. We saw beauty in its truest form." His eyes locked with Emily's. "Young lady, today you did not simply play music. You reminded us what music is for. It is not for impressing others with technical brilliance, though yours is remarkable. It is not for winning awards, though that has meaning too. Music exists to remind us of our shared humanity, to speak what words cannot, to heal places medicine cannot reach." Tears streamed freely throughout the hall. Dr. Choi's patients smiled, their faces radiant. Catherine's sister reached across the aisle to hold Catherine's hand. "But," Romano continued, his tone returning to the formality of the event, "this is still a competition, and we must judge by our established criteria: technical excellence, interpretation, artistic expression, and innovation." He opened the envelope. The third-place winner, Michael Chen. Michael smiled and gave Emily's hand a final squeeze before stepping forward to accept his bronze medal. Second place, Sarah Martinez. A tall girl with bright red hair stepped forward gracefully to receive her silver medal. Romano paused for effect, glancing once more at the competitors. And the winner of this year's Young Artists International competition, with the highest score in the competition's history, Emily Lancaster. The hall exploded in applause. Michael and Sarah embraced Emily, whispering congratulations as rose petals floated gently from the ceiling, a tradition for the winner. But something happened next that broke from tradition. As Romano presented the medal, he spoke again. "Miss Lancaster has not only won first place, the judges have unanimously decided to create a new honor, the Spirit of Music Award. This award will be given annually to the performer who best demonstrates music's power to transform and unite. Emily Lancaster will be its first recipient and its namesake." In the front row, Sister Agnes openly wept. Catherine collapsed into her sister's embrace. Olivia and Thomas clung to one another, pride and regret etched equally into their faces. As Romano placed the medal around Emily's neck, he whispered, "Brava, piccola guerriera. Well done, little warrior." Emily stepped forward to the microphone, her hands trembling but her voice calm. "When I was very young," she began, "someone told me that maybe God gave me this face so I could teach the world to look deeper and to listen harder. I didn't understand that then, but standing here today, I finally do. Her fingers brushed the locket at her neck. We all carry music inside us. Sometimes it's beautiful. Sometimes it's broken, but it's always true. The hall sat in complete silence, not because the audience had nothing left to say, but because there were no words more powerful than the ones they had just heard. Thank you for listening to my truth today. Emily's words echoed through Symphony Hall, but the ripples of that night extended far beyond the competition. In the months that followed, Emily's performance went viral. Videos of her playing amassed millions of views and thousands of comments poured in. Stories from people who felt different, who had faced adversity, and who now found strength in her music. The most immediate impact was felt at the conservatory. Inspired by Emily's performance and journey, the board established a scholarship for talented musicians facing physical or financial barriers. They named it the Emily Lancaster Initiative for Inclusive Arts. Dr. Choi's music therapy program expanded to 3 additional hospitals, with Emily regularly performing for patients. She noticed something remarkable. When she played, the patients stopped hiding behind scarves or hands. They closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, finding solace in each note. One afternoon, while playing Chopin for a young girl recovering from severe burns, Emily overheard the child's mother whisper, "This is the first time she's smiled since the accident." The most profound transformation, however, unfolded within her parents. Olivia and Thomas sold their estate in Fairfield and used the proceeds to establish a foundation supporting arts education for children with disabilities. Olivia often said that watching Emily perform had awakened something long dormant, her ability to see beauty in unexpected places. Their relationship with Emily grew slowly, like the careful composition of a symphony. Olivia and Thomas didn't try to replace the family Emily had found at St. Helena's. Instead, they became part of her extended support system. Sunday dinners became a harmonious gathering of unlikely companions, Sister Agnes saying grace, Catherine discussing musical techniques, Olivia sharing light-hearted society gossip that made everyone laugh, and Thomas quietly watching it all, beaming with pride. Catherine's sister moved back to Connecticut and opened a music school for children with special needs. Late at night, the 2 sisters often shared tea and stories, healing wounds that had festered in silence for years. Sometimes, Emily would play softly for them, her music helping to mend what time alone could not. The competition itself evolved. The Emily Lancaster Award became as coveted as first place, honoring musicians who used their art to bridge divides and touch hearts. Michael Chen, who had won 3rd place, became one of Emily's closest friends. They frequently performed duets, his technical brilliance complementing her emotional depth. But the most meaningful change arrived in the form of letters. They came from around the world, from children with facial differences, from parents who had learned to see beyond appearances, and from musicians who had rediscovered their passion through Emily's story. One letter in particular stood out. It came from a young pianist in Japan who had stopped performing after an accident left her with visible scars. "When I saw you play," she wrote, "I realized our scars are not our limitations. They are the marks of our courage. Tomorrow, I will play in public again." Sister Agnes kept a scrapbook of these letters and often read them aloud in the chapel. "See," she'd say with a smile, "God's plan was bigger than we imagined." On the anniversary of her competition victory, Emily held a special concert at St. Helena's. The old chapel was packed to capacity. People standing in the aisles, sitting on the floor, wherever space allowed. Emily played her grandmother's favorites, her original compositions, and finally, a new piece she had written, titled The Face of Grace. Before playing it, she addressed the audience. "People often ask me if I'm happy with how my life turned out, if I wish things had been different, if I had been different. But I've learned that sometimes, our greatest challenges are actually our greatest gifts. My face taught me to see with my heart. And music taught me to help others do the same." As she played the final notes, sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across her face. No one saw imperfection anymore. They saw only light, love, and the radiant joy of a soul set free through music. After the concert, as people filtered out of the chapel, a small girl with a cleft palate tugged on Emily's dress. I want to play piano like you, the girl said shyly. Emily knelt to meet her gaze, smiling gently. Then you will, she said softly, because music doesn't care what we look like, it only cares about what we feel in our hearts. That evening, as Emily practiced alone in the chapel, her fingers danced lightly over the keys. The notes of Amazing Grace filled the space, a quiet reminder of how far she had come and how much further her music would carry others. In the now empty chapel, Sister Agnes Marie listened quietly as the soft notes of Amazing Grace filled the space. It was the first piece Emily had ever learned. The nun smiled, remembering the frightened little girl who had arrived at St. Helena's so many years ago. Amazing Grace, she whispered softly to herself. How sweet the sound. 5 years later, the halls of St. Helena's School of Music bustled with life. Where once there had been only a single aging piano, there were now practice rooms filled with instruments. Music drifted down every corridor, wrapping the school in the melodies of hope and transformation. A sign above the entrance greeted each visitor, where every voice finds its song. It was Emily's motto, the foundation of the school she had built. Now 23, Emily divided her time between performing internationally and teaching at St. Helena's. She had made it her mission to ensure that every child with musical promise could study there, regardless of appearance or financial circumstance. The Emily Lancaster Foundation, funded by the Lancasters and countless others touched by her story, covered the costs. On this particular spring morning, Emily was teaching a master class. Her students were a diverse group, some with visible differences, others with hidden battles, but all united by their love of music. Among them was Maria, the young girl with the cleft palate who had tugged on Emily's dress 5 years earlier after her chapel concert. Now 12, Maria was blossoming into a talented violinist, her confidence growing with each passing year. Sister Agnes, though retired, remained a constant presence at St. Helena's. She often sat quietly in the corner of the chapel watching Emily teach with pride. Catherine had become the school's artistic director, working alongside her sister, who ran a special needs program. Their shared passion helped the school flourish. The hallways were lined with photographs chronicling the school's journey, Emily's competition victory, the first recital, and the many milestones that followed. Olivia and Thomas Lancaster had found new roles as well. They became beloved figures at the school. Olivia organizing recitals and fundraisers, and Thomas quietly ensuring that every child had the instrument they needed. Dr. Choi continued to bring her patients to the school's concerts. Many of them eventually became students themselves, drawn to the healing power of music. On this particular day, as Emily's class wrapped up, a reporter from the Hartford Post waited nearby for an interview. "Did you ever imagine," the reporter asked, "that your story would touch so many lives?" Emily glanced around the room, watching as students packed up their instruments, laughing and chatting with one another. Her eyes settled on the photographs lining the walls, the family she had built, the family she had reconciled with. "I learned long ago," she replied with a smile, "that music has a way of writing stories bigger than we can imagine. We just have to be brave enough to play our part." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the chapel's stained glass windows, Emily sat alone at the same piano where her journey had begun. Her fingers drifted over the keys, weaving together the notes of Amazing Grace. But as the familiar tune echoed through the chapel, a new melody emerged, soft yet full of joy, acceptance, and hope. It was the sound of transformation. From the doorway, Sister Agnes listened quietly, the music blending with the fading light of day. The notes floated out into the twilight, carrying a message that had become Emily's legacy, that true beauty, like true grace, appears in countless forms. And every life, no matter how different, holds its own perfect harmony.